Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martin Loffers. I'm the Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. You may also know me as the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, and I have other roles. Welcome to this live webinar on International Women's Day. And we have a nice, interesting panel to discuss a great and a very important topic. So let me introduce the speakers. Well, you see me on the left-hand side, and next to me is Melanie Salter. She's from Boom. Melanie, hi.
Hi, thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, and we'll introduce Melanie later, her role. And next to Melanie, we have Dominique Jansen. Hi, Dominique.
Hi, Martijn. Hi, everyone.
And last but not least, we have Patrick Gunter from Bausch and Lomb.
Hi there.
Patrick.
Hi.
there.
Good afternoon.
So we have an equal shared diverse panel, I would say, on a gender diversity matter. So we have a nice panel coming up, and some quiet remarks. This webinar will be recorded, and the PDF will be made available afterwards. Everybody is on mute, but feel free to ask questions. I'm tracking down the questions in the Q&A functionality on the right-hand side. You can also chat with each other, but I will track down the Q&A at the right side. So if you have questions, do ask them along our conversation. And if these questions are in line of what we are discussing, I will ask these questions right away. If these questions are, another topic, we will reserve them to the end. So we have a Q&A at the end. And right after this hour, we have an extra 30 minutes of after talk. So we go into the lounge. They look like this. So if you want to have a further discussion with Melanie, Dominique, Patrick, and myself, please join us in a lounge. And we will be sitting at table 1. So we can have an extra conversation if you have more to discuss with us. All right. As of now, we will put off the camera so you can enlarge your screen, so you can have a better look at the slides. So, and we'll be joining in the lounge in live with cameras on. All right. So it's International Women's Day, and well, the theme of today is embrace equity. So here you see the slide about the theme of today. So Melanie, what is your take on equity? So what is your meaning of this?
Yeah, so it's really important to distinguish the difference between equity and equality. So I see equality as it's the destination, it's where we want to go, where everybody is equal. Equity is that we're not there at the moment. There are people who are more disadvantaged than others. And so equity is the journey where we recognize that some groups need extra help compared to others. So it adds an element of fairness and justice to the idea of, equality.
And what is your point on inclusion? Well, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what is your take on inclusion?
That's a big question, Martijn. It's creating an environment where everybody is welcome, where everyone is valued.
All right. I compared like a soccer team. When you have gender diversity, you also want women in your team, in a soccer team. But okay, they are in the field. Do they get the right spot in the field for one thing? But also, do they get the ball? Inclusion. Give her the ball. And that's also something maybe men can understand. If you put a woman in the fielding of a soccer team, do give her the ball. Otherwise, it has no meaning.
No. Yeah, I do like that analogy. I see this football pitch with like women standing all over going, I'm free, I'm here.
Yeah, I'm here. Give me the ball. Yeah.
I've got a clear shot at the goal, but you're not passing it to me. So
Yeah.
I do like that analogy.
All right. So, okay, Melanie, can you give me a further explanation of Boom, and then you take the subject from there?
All right, thanks, Martijn. So, it's welcome, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Melanie Salter. I'm the Director of Supply Chain Research at Boom. Boom is a member association. It's a global community for women in supply chain. So we have over 700 members around the world in 46 countries. We recently, in the last few months, we got someone in Papua New Guinea, and we're cheering. It's like, that's brilliant. That's so cool that we're so far reaching around the world. And these are all fantastic women across all functional roles within supply chain and across industry sectors. So if you've got a supply chain, you can be part of Boom, and our mission is to support and empower more women so that we have more women in higher positions, more role models, and we're well on that path towards equality. We've got these fabulous, you can see at the bottom, some of our corporate members, just so we've got some really great companies supporting us and also supporting the women within their organizations by giving them membership to Boom.
Yeah. And I also see Diageo as a member of Boom. And by the way, Diageo was acknowledged as number 2 on the top 100 of Equileap, top 100 of gender equality. So Diageo is, doing a great job. I was wondering, Melanie, you see all kind of roles. Are these on certain levels or all kind of levels?
We do cover all levels. I'd say we're sort of the middle section.
Yeah.
Is covered by Boom, because that's where the gap is. There are things for very senior leaders, but it's just below senior leadership where there is a gap where women need more support. So it's down there, and people joining the industry, we support them too.
We'll talk about later, in mid-career, what's happening over there. You also supported the survey by Awesome and Gartner. They are doing this kind of survey every year, and maybe you can talk us through a few results.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really nice scene setter for this webinar, is just to take you through some of the key points that came out of last year's survey. And while I've got everybody here, this survey is running again for 2023, and we're in the last week of the survey being open. So when you get off this, it'd be great as your big action for International Women's Day to go and fill that in, because collecting this data, we need the data to be able to understand where we are, and it's a really great report this. So please fill in the survey. But as a scene setting, so number of women in the overall supply chain workforce. So you can see we're going up through the years. Over the years, the number of women in supply chain is going up.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit sad seeing that drop off between 2021 and 22. I think that's COVID and the number of women just having to drop out of the workforce because of the increased childcare, quite frankly, which depresses me. And that shows you the desperate need for equity.
Yeah.
But on the plus side, I think in 2023, I suspect it will go up again. But there is an upward trajectory, and that is encouraging. It's a lot slower than I would like, Martijn, quite frankly. It's improving by 1 or 2% a year is not great, but hell, it's a win. It's going up, and I'll take it.
Yeah, if I look at this stats, I'm always curious to see, if you dissect this data by region, I can expect that it would be looking different in Eastern Europe compared to Western Europe because I know in Turkey, Romania, and Ukraine there are way more female supply chain managers and professionals than male ones. So I think this is an overall average, but I'm curious to see if you have the numbers by region.
No, sadly, I don't have the visibility of that data.
No. But I will check with the Awesome and Gartner.
Yeah, I'd like to see it too.
Yeah.
And this being Gartner, I think it's probably very US heavy.
Yeah.
There will be the rest of the world, but I think it's most of the data will have come from the US. But not many people are gathering this data, so quite honestly, we'll take what we can get.
Yeah. And if you look further about progressing of careers, how do this data look over there?
Yes, so if we start from the point that 40% of the workforce is women, as soon as you get to that first line manager position, it already drops down to 34%. So we've lost 6% of women are not being represented. And the further up the hierarchy you go, the number of women in senior roles drops further and further until, we've more than halved the number of women. We're down to 19% in that chief supply chain officer or SVP role. And if you look at this, I've got the data, I didn't put it all in because there's too many slides, but these numbers again are creeping up. Year on year, these numbers are going up, but again, painfully slowly. We just need to make, I'd love to see sort of exponential growth in these numbers to get it up to 50-50, or at least 60-40.
At least, yeah. If you look at this drop off of numbers on the female side, what is your explanation why this percentage is getting lower and lower?
Oh, so many things. Do you want to go on to the next slide, Martijn? Because I think
yeah, maybe.
I think it talks about it nicely, and I like this visual that we've got of the iceberg. So the visible bit, that's the good stuff that's going on. That is the stuff that is helping that upward trajectory. It's putting us on that path, which is great. We're measuring the gender pay gap. What gets measured gets managed. So that is closing there. I think the UN released such depressing stats today. I think my mind shied away from remembering how many 100 years it's going to be until we reach close the gender pay gap. But it is being measured. It is getting better in certain countries.
It's also good to know what the reasons are behind this this gender pay gap to start with.
Yes, yeah, and that's a really big area, Martijn.
Maybe to include Dominic, because she's heading recruitment agencies, because it's also a matter of negotiation of your starting salary when you get to a new employer, isn't it, Dominic?
Yeah, it truly is. And well, what we've noticed, especially when mediating senior directors level or C-level, many female leaders do have a firm position while negotiating their salary. But I also understand that maybe for senior management roles, it's more difficult for them to just stand up for yourself. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think what I see around me is that men are way more prone to ask for more money, whereas females less so. So that's also.
There's a responsibility that sits with the companies here to do the right thing, and we were talking about this the other day when we met. We had this great webinar on Boom, where we had 4 women who all ran manufacturing plants around for their companies, based all around the world. And women ask for less money, but they're making the point of saying, well, you've asked for this, but actually everybody else is being paid that, so we're going to pay you more. It's actually looking at that gender pay gap right when someone enters the company, so that it just doesn't perpetuate. You've got to nip it in the bud, basically.
Yeah. And okay, and we're still talking about above the water, so yeah, that's the gender pay gap measurement. How about the rest?
Well, I mean, I'll move on to the positive stuff, because Dominic is going to talk about this inclusive operational practices, or a bit on it, especially on the attracting, how to hire. There's some really good stuff being done in attract, retain, and advance women, and we're seeing that, and we are seeing the numbers increase because of that. Also sticking with the what gets measured gets managed. We're setting targets. There are more initiatives to support women and minority groups, and they're having positive effects. The upside of the lockdowns was that hybrid remote working is much more socially acceptable. It's much more acceptable within companies now. Flexible working, extended leave, all of that good stuff is out there. It's becoming the norm. It's great, and we're seeing positive results. But the bottom of the icebergs, it's still there, and it still gets me down sometimes, quite honestly.
It's huge.
It's we talk about this on International Women's Day, but I do this all year round, and I love my job. I absolutely love it. I'm so lucky to work for Boom, but sometimes it's just like, come on, let's get going. We can fix this, everybody, but everybody needs to be involved.
Yeah.
And on that first point, there's so many more points I could make on both sides of the iceberg, but time is limited. But I've just picked out a few. But inspirational role models. I've been in supply chain management for over 20 years. I very rarely met any senior women in supply chain. But earlier today, I was talking to some women in supply chain in their 20s who just, recently joined the profession. They are still struggling to find female role models, which honestly makes me sad. But it's all right because I can point them. I know lots now through Boom, and I can point them out to them. But that it's a struggle is still an indication of how far we have to go.
Melanie, these role models, are they females or it could also be males? We talk about mentors, coaches, allies. Maybe you should explain a bit more. What is a role model?
So it's just to be able to look up and see I think it's that, you can't be what you can't see. So there's some amazing, role models of both gender out there, but in supply chain in particular, they do tend to be more men, and that's a great role model, but it's also not, if you see another woman out there that looks like you, it is much easier to think, oh, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. Great male allies. We've got Patrick on this call, who is a great male ally who's out there, addressing the gender pay gap and supporting women and creating role models, and that's great, and that's what we need more of.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He will talk about it later in depth. And when you talk about the second point, lack of perceived transparency.
This is an interesting one. Boom runs a survey every year, and we asked, it's the voice of the profession, and in a number of our surveys, which are available on our website if you want to see the report, one of the key things that are holding women back is just this lack of transparency in opportunities in their company. So knowing that that there is a position to be filled, what the skills are that you need to get it, and then getting those skills are still barriers to women. And so having the visibility of that, and also we spoke about compensation. It's still it's an ongoing issue, and we need greater transparency around it.
An interesting point. I read a survey about academic research, I think 5-6 years ago. Basically, it said if a woman is going for a top job and is up to against two male competitors, and if she doesn't get a job and HR isn't explaining afterwards why she didn't get the job, she will never ever go for a top job again. Whereas male competitors would say, okay, I tried next time and we'll do the better. So basically said, if HR doesn't explain afterwards why she didn't get the job, she probably won't do it again.
God, I hope that's changed in the intervening year, in the interim years.
Dominique, can you remark something about that? Do you recognize that?
I think this more falls into Dominique's area of expertise. I haven't done the research into that.
Yeah. Okay. Dominique?
Yeah. Well, we do notice that it's way more difficult to make female leaders enthusiastic about a vacant position to start with. But I do not really recognize the fact that they don't want to try again if they don't get the feedback, especially because the feedback is not always, realistic or most honest. I do have good hopes that they try again, even if they don't hear the feedback. I'm sure that it's good to talk about the reason behind decision making for rejection, but I do not fully recognize what you're saying, Martijn. Luckily.
Okay, maybe it has changed, like Melanie said.
Yeah.
So, and Melanie, last point about culture.
Yeah, this is the biggie for me. This is the one thing you take away from my section of this is around culture and leadership, because I think we all want to be. We want an equal world. We want a world where a workplace is equitable and inclusive and diversity is valued. And the biggest barrier to that happening is senior leadership. And so, but there's also a massive opportunity for leadership. They're going, you want a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture in your organization? Great, because the onus is on you. It's got to come from the top, and then it's got to be fed down into every other part of the organization. But if the senior leaders are not on board, then you won't get it. But you won't achieve the DE&I that you want, that inclusive workspace, the equality. But the great thing is there is a really great business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you want to go on to the next slide, Martijn. This because I did the research on this recently, just going over the papers, and it's like the bottom line is, if you create this equitable, inclusive environment where diversity is valued, you make more money. I mean, that's it. You make more money. On top of that, you've got increased employee performance engagement, improved innovation, talent crisis, but people are much more likely to stay if they're feeling valued and they're in an inclusive environment. So you get, talent retention improves, you get improved decision making. Interestingly, consumers, when they see a more diverse executive board, it improves their perception of the brand of the company. So I do like that the general public is looking at the executive board and making a judgment, and they do vote with their feet. Yeah. And the other bit of research shows that executive boards with more women on them give high priority to environmental and social issues. So this is, I quote Beth Morgan, the CEO at Boom, it's pretty much a motto is, we want a world where everyone wins. And this business case is a world where everyone wins, because it's better for the people, it's better for the planet, and it's better for profit. It's all three. So senior leaders, you're out there, go and do the research, do the work, create that culture, because it will pay dividends.
Yeah. Good, excellent point. And I think especially in supply chain, there's a lot of opportunity over here, to contribute to this success, because, as we've seen in the last 3 years, that supply chain has contributed to a large extent to the ongoing businesses. So, supply chain is in the right spot. Dominique, so maybe you can explain your dual role, for one hand, as SCM executives, and on the other hand on Diversity Works.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Martijn. It's a great pleasure to be part of this webinar. My name is Dominique van Wijnen. I'm a mother of a 2-year-old daughter, Lua, and of a 4-year-old son, Moos. And I'm also owner of SCM Executives, which is an executive search company for directors and C-level positions in supply chain management and logistics. And I'm also founder of Diversity Works, which is a nonprofit initiative which we started in 2019 to boost DE&I in our sector. Listening to Melanie's story, two thoughts popped up in my head. And firstly, let me start with a big shout out to the magnificent business case we have for embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's fact-based evidence we cannot longer ignore. Secondly, let me share my personal frustration looking at data from Gartner in relation to gender representation in supply chain. Although we shouldn't feel discouraged by these results, it's very hard for me to understand why women are still underrepresented, particularly on directors and C-level. Just to share you some insights, looking at our activities at SCM Executives, again, it's an executive search company focusing on senior level roles within our sector. And I listen to business owners every day, and I truly get the impression that many of them are trying harder than ever before, maybe, to balance their management teams. It's clear when I have these conversations with mostly men that it's becoming extremely complex to deal with these regional and global supply chain ecosystems. Due to factors like the pandemic and major geopolitical shifts. I mean, that's just a matter of fact. But of course, talking to these senior stakeholders, it seems to be that there is a growing awareness that inclusive leadership is just crucial. And we also notice that clients value the power of empathy and cooperation, and that these clients also explicitly ask for, in our case, more women on the shortlist. So, yeah, to make my point again, it's on the one hand amazing to see that business case, which is pretty strong, but on the other hand, it's just frustrating that we are going so slowly making progress.
Maybe it's good to talk about about stereotypes. What's
Yeah.
holding us back.
Yeah. So again, our clients do ask for a women on the shortlist, like almost for every assignment, which is amazing. If they want to gain different perspectives on innovation, or literally say that they want to move from egos making the call, or if they want to lead an impactful transformation, it's a request from them, a firm request to show more women on the shortlist. And unfortunately, we also see that good intentions at the beginning of the assignments sometimes just fail because of the fact that they rush their recruitment process because they feel urgent, and then this is the stereotyped feedback that we get. So I asked some consultants in preparation for this webinar, Martijn, in my team, to share some of the most striking quotes that they got from clients after they've talked to female leaders on the shortlist. And as you can tell, it's
Shocking.
It's pretty remarkable. Yeah.
So young children. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's quite shocking.
Yeah.
You look at yourself. You can manage and you can work.
Yeah. Well, that's also one of the reasons why I want to start with my introduction mentioning Moos and Lua, because it doesn't make any sense. But you cannot blame you cannot blame all of them. I mean, it's also a lack of understanding because it's just not familiar for them to work with someone who has the young children at home. So, but yeah, it's still based on the assumption that it's not gonna work. It's also not gonna work for them to have a leader on board that asks for a 4-day work week or flexibility or home office still. So that's striking.
I was wondering, Patrick, to include you, what is your take if you look at these stereotypes? Do you recognize these?
I recognize some of them, and in my experience, sometimes I have to defend certain decisions to people corporate, also in certain geographic areas where things are assumed not to be working. Having kids, for instance, on the 4-day working week and so on. And it's perceptions that are out there, and you have to fight them, and try and take them away. They shouldn't be part of a reason to not to hire somebody. Very clear, but that's easier said than done because a lot of people still have these things as a mindset.
You told me an example what you have experienced when you hired someone, a lady who was pregnant. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, we had a recruitment process for a manager position, and actually the best candidate was somebody who was pregnant at the time, and I hired her, and I got a lot of heat over that because they said, "How can you hire somebody who is pregnant?" I said, "What's the point? It's the best person. So she starts a bit later. What's the problem?" And it's those type of things that you have to stick with and push forward. Everybody can have a reason at one point why somebody might not work well in a situation, or it's not the best candidate. But if it's the best candidate, that should not be a reason.
Yeah.
And if I look at these stereotypes, like, you know, entrepreneurial mindset, making money,
Mhm.
you know, typical male comments, I would say, but, you know, and you know, asking too many questions. But, you know, think, you know, giving a new perspective. It's good to have more questions, you know,
Yeah.
question about how things are evolving. Don't you think, Patrick? You know, these kind of things, you know, you should turn it around.
No, absolutely, and you need to work and finding also solutions for certain things that might occur. And I always say hire for attitude and train for skills, and doesn't matter in what job we're talking about, but it's working together to make it work and facilitate people to be able to do their jobs. And if that's working from home or 4-day or a different way, you will, in return, you will get highly motivated people. Again, the working day of 9 to 5, that's something of the past. And people who are highly motivated and you offer a flexible workplace, you will get a lot in return.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
Dominic, you can come and tell me a bit more about diversity hiring. How does it work, or how doesn't it work?
Yeah. So what we see, I mean, there are good intentions, especially looking at the clients that want more inclusive leadership. They truly believe that female leadership will be the answer, which is a good thing. Because they relate that to empathy, to collaboration, cooperation. But then you see the feedback from the previous slide, and they tend to prefer standard or similar profiles. So because they feel a sense of urgency, they are rushing themselves, and they don't take the time to just look at the data or measure the behavior that they're actually looking for in line with the best business strategy they have. So for us at SCM, it's really important to focus on similarity bias. So that's a bias in favor of preserving status quo. In this case, preserving white middle-aged men mostly, because this is what happens so often. So hiring managers that prefer the standard or similar profile. And if you want to boost DE&I hiring, the diverse slate hiring strategy is a great way to achieve this. So it just means try to find more women on the shortlist. Try harder, take a bit more time to find them, or challenge yourself to see, are we also willing to think a bit out of the box? Are we willing to look at different sectors, to different senior levels, to really find at least 2 women on the list, because it makes a difference, as you can tell by this slide.
Yeah, because if you have only one woman on the finalist pool, it looks like a
Yeah,
wild card, and you have
exactly.
she has hardly any chance.
Yeah, because the difference between her and the familiar standard or similar profile of the hiring manager is becoming way too obvious. And putting 2 women together, or 2 minorities, then you immediately see the difference.
I got a lot of calls about, you know, there aren't enough female supply chain leaders available.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Well, it's definitely harder to find them because, well, I think the numbers show that there are less. Next to this, it's also a matter of fact that if you call a male leader, they are way more willing to believe that they are or could be the right fit to the role, whereas women are way more critical. They ask a lot of questions. They tend to be a bit more modest. So if they only tick, well, 5 out of 6, then they say, I'm not sure whether this is for me. And if there is a man, but I mean, they are way more convinced of the fact that they could do a great job for a client, even when they tick only 2 of 5 boxes. And so that's one side of the story. But if you are willing to challenge yourself to see whether you would be okay with a lady from a different industry, for example, because of her potential, because of her soft skills, instead of just looking in a very traditional way at educational background, knowledge, industry knowledge, experience, then they are there. It's not that difficult, and we do find them, but we take our responsibility very serious, because we are there to challenge the clients, also to just meet them and see whether they could fit, even though they do not have 100% fit when it comes to industry knowledge or experience.
Yeah, and I talked.
Martijn, can I ask a question? I'm really curious to know about if there's any data on the diversity of the interviewing panel, what difference that makes, because I'm pretty sure I've read something talking about, increased diversity in the interviewing panel, the better, the more diverse the people you're going to recruit.
Yeah. So I don't have the numbers, Melanie, here, but if you mean that it's effective to have a diverse interviewing panel, then that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Another thing, I spoke to an IMD professor a few years ago, and basically she said, experience doesn't matter that much anymore. Times are changing so rapidly, so we don't need that experience. So my take is, just take a younger female supply chain professional and progress her more easily and more rapidly into a higher level echelon, because that's the future, and she's representing the future, and you have a tick in the box on gender diversity, and also about having a young perspective at a senior level. So that's my take on it. Maybe that's too practical. Dominic, you have done some research on your own statistics from 2020 to 22. So maybe you can take us through these numbers.
Yeah. So if you look at our assignments, then, we are a boutique company. So we have, let's say, around 50 assignments a year on C-level. And especially when I started Diversity Works together with Elise Gerritsen in 2019, I was very much focusing on my role being the owner of SCM Executives. What can I do in order to make sure that there are more female leaders placed? And in 2020, we just started challenging clients to see what are you willing to do in order to meet more women on the shortlist. And as you can tell, it's only only 15% of the total placements, unfortunately. But if you go to the next slide and the slide after, you can see that it really helps if you place more female candidates on the shortlist by getting these placements to a higher level, the actual placements to a higher level. And like Melanie said, you see it, looking at these graphics as well, it's going way too slowly, but we are doing at least something to make sure that they get introduced, and that it becomes more and more familiar to them to talk to female leaders that are, that could be a very interesting fit, just like their similar profiles or people or men that look like them.
Melanie, I was wondering, what is your take on why it takes so long? Why doesn't it progress more quickly?
Yeah, I think it comes down to societal, the prejudices that exist in society in that, you know, from the minute children are born, they're gendered. You know, girls in pink, boom, boys in trucks, girls in butterflies. I mean, it's pervasive. It's all the way through. It perpetuates the differences, not the similarities. It needs societal change. But I do think, you know, I think governments could be doing more, but generally industry leads and governments follow. So what I love is that some companies are out there just plowing ahead, just going, this isn't right, we're going to change it, and setting, you know, setting some best practices, you know, setting up creche for children at the offices, you know, equal parental leave, such a big one for gender equality, because it's one of the main reasons women drop out mid-career. A lot of societal things, and this is where, you know, industry is showing some of the best practice out there. Not enough, more to do. Let me point that out in case we haven't already. But yeah, it's moving too slowly, and it needs to go faster, my time.
Yeah, Patrick, you have been working in Asia quite a few years. What's your view on that side from the other side of the world?
Well, and not only in Asia, but also in other countries, like you mentioned earlier, or Eastern Europe, for instance. And it depends very much on the different countries. For instance, I tried to recruit a manager in Japan, and actually the best candidate was a woman, and the GM told me no chance because nobody will listen to her. Bear in mind, that's quite some time ago. Where in other parts of Asia, no problem at all. I mean, at Indonesia, at the manufacturing site, the majority were women. Not a problem at all. So it depends a little bit what country you're talking about. But you do have challenges in some areas, and other areas not. Turkey recruited a manager, and most of the candidates, 6 out of 7 candidates were women.
Okay, that's good to hear. So there are some good parts of the world where it has already changed, obviously. Dominic, maybe you can wrap up and say, okay, you know, your foundation is called Diversity Works. So how does it work?
Yes, is that the so we've set up Diversity Works in 2019 together with my partner Elise Gerritsen and a fantastic team of program leaders. And you know, we feel that it's important to start at the beginning. So we set up a program which is called Young Talent, and it's really interesting to see what needs to be done in order to increase the intake of a greater diversity of students. So we have strong collaborations with some schools and universities to understand what's important for them when working or starting an internship, for example, at a supply chain organization, and what they can do in order to improve also their culture. Melanie, it was very interesting what you just said about how important it is to create an inclusive culture as well. And so they've been busy also to make a diversity scan together with the students so they can actually measure the culture and some other important topics to reason why they would continue a career at that certain company or not, being a minority, for example. So that's interesting. It gives very interesting insights for decision makers on the company side. Then we have a role model program, and Patrick, he's a role model. So we asked men and women to become role models for Diversity Works. We've gathered some talents that have their own personal development teams or topics to discuss. And it's still a bit difficult for us also, and that's something that you referred to in the beginning of the webinar, to find out when are you a good role model. So what do you need to do? How often do you need to catch up with your with your talent, what is expected from you, how much time does it cost, etc. So that's still in a development phase, but it's doing well. And it's also very nice to see, Melanie, that there are many people out there within our Diversity Works network that would love to become a role model, but we also see that there is some hesitation because they just do not really know what people expect from them. So that's a learning point for us as well. But they are out there. So that's I think a positive thing. And then we have a meet and greet program where we organize webinars. We organize a yearly event on the 11th of April this year. But we also have a few subject matter experts when it comes to DE&I. So if there is someone who says, okay, I'm not sure what to do in order to make my culture a bit more inclusive, then we can also connect you to one of these experts in our network that can make a roadmap or just give a 1 or 2 day workshop or a training or whatsoever. So
yeah, and we all had a discussion earlier as preparation for this webinar, and we all came to the conclusion that it's very important to have this kind of role models, especially when you are entering a director's phase. So you are, and maybe,
absolutely.
and Melanie, maybe that's also the case with Boom, because in the mid-level, mid-career level, you have probably your uncertainty, and then you need sponsors and role models and mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. It's critical at that stage. It's when
And
so many
I,
people drop out, and with the role models, particularly the sponsors, having a mentor is great, but sponsors even better because they are actively out there searching for opportunities, trying to get you that promotion.
and you also have a notion that especially in a male environment, some of them make a competition out of it.
Oh yeah, I heard this example. It was lovely. There was one company, unfortunately I can't remember which one it was, but basically all the senior male leaders were told, you're all going to be sponsors. We're all giving you a woman in the company to sponsor. And it's like, great, but it turned into a massive competition for those senior leaders to see who could get their sponsee the furthest in the organization. And it became a real point of sort of competitive pride, which is like, it's just brilliant. It's exactly the kind of environment you want to see. It's like people competing to want you to succeed. It's a lovely concept.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it's also kind of fun to make it different. Patrick, maybe you can tell a bit more about your role at Bausch & Lomb, and also what you've been doing, to improve diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, so I've been with Bausch almost 19 years, various roles based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, at the Amsterdam Logistics Center. Responsible for all logistics in EMEA region for the various business units of Bausch. The slide here, you see the diversity numbers of the Amsterdam Logistics Center. And that's a good lead into one of the first slides after this. It looks really good, and I can say I'm quite proud of these numbers. On the other hand, the devil is in the detail, and if you really dive into more detail, you will see that at certain levels, as also was shown earlier, you see that you do have some discrepancies. But we have a very international site, at 31 nationalities on site, which is a great atmosphere. We are therefore able to also recruit more regionally, globally. English is the language, that makes it a bit easier. But also, besides the warehouse and distribution area, which is highly automated, we have a lot of also regional functions that you see here.
Yeah. So if you have 3 main topics to address, so maybe you can, well, these are the 3 of them. So maybe you can start with the first one. Don't take it for granted.
Yeah, so I took the angle of what can I do as a leader in my organization, and for sure, if I hear the word role model, I always get a bit nervous and anxious because have I done enough? By far not. Have we always put it on the agenda? Also by far not. So that don't take for granted is a good starting point for that. So if you go to the next one. Um, um, I could say if I look at the first slide numbers, yeah, we're doing actually quite good. And is there anything else to do? I don't think so, but that's not true. You need to really further look into the detailed numbers. Let's say diversity by function and so on. But also in our business, people like to talk about supply chain. They like about talk about technology, about logistics. But it's also about people, and actually, I'm stating that people is the most important part of the supply chain. I can select the right partners. I can buy the right equipment. I can have the right automation or IT systems, but ultimately it's all the people that run our supply chain. So it's absolutely crucial that you continue to work actively on a diverse team. And yesterday I made the comment that in my entire career I've done all kind of assessments with management teams that would identify like a Myers-Briggs type of profile that building a team with different backgrounds is the most successful. And like Melanie was showing as well, it proves that a diverse team is actually making money. And diversity is part of that. But sometimes we seem to forget, or we have a disconnect that diversity is part of that. And in some cases, indeed, people say, "Yeah, we tried." Now, the assumption is a limit is also similar to the numbers I show. Don't assume that we're there. And the equal salary is a good example that I was listening to the radio and I heard this as a topic, and I went also there. I thought, well, actually, we in our company we're not making a difference between men and women, and it should be all right. But by the time I reached the office, and that day I had a board meeting. I said, well, let's really dive into it. Is that really true? And it turned out that it was not true. In certain areas, in certain bandwidths, we did see significant differences between men and women, and we decided to correct that in the next the following 2 years. Um, but also, it's about we often think that we understand the needs. But in my position, how on earth can I fully understand the needs of, let's say, young talent? So I need to talk to them. I need to explore what the needs are. I need to try and put myself in their position and say, how can we support their way of working, their needs, their requirements? Like we spoke earlier about a 4-day work week or working from home or other things. So it's not assume. Always challenge yourself in the management team meetings, in the board meetings, and have it on the agenda. That's really important.
And final part.
Yeah, and from all that, it's really take responsibility. And it was already mentioned earlier. You really need to start at the educational level. No matter what level, you need to work actively with the universities, with the colleges, provide traineeships, and really support people within the company, work together with them in developing their programs, but also make supply chain attractive for women to join and make a conscious choice that actually supply chain is very, very exciting. But we as companies have a responsibility. It's not just up to the university. Um, and also yeah, you should not settle for less. I mean, you should have yourself set targets. So when you're going into recruitment processes, if you have promotional opportunities, really make sure that diversity is always a topic and a checkbox there. um, and all the processes, all the decisions you have to make, again, in the management teams, board meetings, whatever, as a leader, make sure that you have this check. It's quite common in our business. A compliance and a health check, a safety check is always there. Any form you have a safety check. Well, have a diversity box on your forms and say, let's think about it. We take all the opportunities into account, and you need to take responsibility and take action.
Maybe that's a nice bridge to a few slides I created. So basically what we did, and I did it together with quite a few female supply chain directors. So basically, a few years ago, before COVID, we said, it's the responsibility of three parties involved: the female talent, direct manager or their boss, and HR manager. And we created a checklist. Basically, we created three checklists, and it's all based on academic research. So we've been to a lot of articles, academic articles, about gender diversity. And well, basically, it said, there are three angles and three responsibilities. So out of that, we created three checklists: one for the female talents, but also a checklist for the manager, and also a checklist for the HR manager. They are all online available. We will distribute the link later on. So there are action points, and when we did a few sessions 2 years ago, no, 5 years ago already, one of the female directors said, there are 10 points, action points in this checklist. Do make sure that you, at least one of the points you score negatively on, improve it for the next year. So don't try to improve the 10 out of 10. But if there are one or two, just one of them. And basically, with this checklist, you can even create a gender diversity gap analysis. So from the three angles, from the talent side, from the manager side, and the HR manager side, if you have 10 questions, and if for the female talent is 5 out of 10, you have 50%. If the HR manager is scoring 3 out of 10, it's 30%, and the manager is 4 out of 10, it's 40%. You can even calculate the gender diversity gap in your company. So basically, you can do it on a practical level. But last year or 2 years ago, we had a similar webinar with Melanie and her colleague Beth, and they pointed out, we should have a fourth angle. That's the sponsor and ally, and we didn't get to the action points, what this sponsor ally should do. So Melanie, you said, we need a fourth uh, angle to this responsibility field.
I think I added a fifth, didn't I?
Yeah.
The
There
roof.
was the roof. Yeah,
I think I went with the foundation, that culture and from leadership.
Yeah.
That leadership and everything else kind of flows from that, because the female talent, the manager and the HR manager, they're all, living and breathing within this culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, which honestly makes their jobs a lot easier. If the culture is there, the support is there from senior management, everything else should flow more easily. There'll be less resistance, fewer barriers.
Yeah. So the next step would be from my side to actually illustrate a roof on top of that, and that's the culture with all the things you just mentioned. But it's good to visualize here. There are different stakeholders in this whole field, I would say.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. We only have a few minutes left for this webinar, and afterwards, like I said, we have 30 minutes extra as an after talk, so you can join us at the table in the lounge directly. So maybe if you have questions, feel free to ask now. Otherwise, you can address these questions later on. So I just got a message in the chat. This joint responsibility triangle looks great. Now we even have a quadrant. So if there's any questions, please ask now. But maybe to you, Melanie, you did also a survey last year about, what does it need to have a great job in supply chain. You also had some points of the difference between male and female respondents. Melanie?
Yes, sorry, I'm just thinking back. It was a really long time ago, Martijn. Sorry, do you want to give me a bit more of a pointer? I'm not sure.
No. Yeah, no. You think that what does it need for a supply chain professional to succeed? It was in the last fall, I would say, and there were some differences between male and female.
There were a few differences, which I am. Oh yeah, I think a big one was around, and it ties in with the digital equality, which is where women were, when you asked what area of supply chain do you think you really need to know more about to succeed in your career, and women didn't go for the more technical things, the more STEM things, the AIs, the IoT, all of those different areas. And you can just really see the gendered response there, with the fewer women in STEM and the men leaning more towards the STEM areas of supply chain. So that's, again, that society sort of, the society pushing women out, away from STEM and men more into it, and it comes out in these surveys, and you see it in supply chain.
All right. Okay. Maybe people want to have more questions directly to us. So basically, I would invite the people in the audience to join us at the table. So we'll be sitting at table 1 in the lounge, looking like this. So if you see an empty chair, click on it, and a Zoom kind of meeting will open it up in this platform. So feel free to join us. Next, like I said, we created 3 checklists for the female talent, the HR manager, and the direct manager, the boss. So it's available here. And here's the report I mentioned earlier about this from Boom. And on the right-hand side, you see the website of Diversity Works and the event on April 11th in the Netherlands. And with that, I would like to thank you, the 3 of you. So, Dominique, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Martijn.
All right. Melanie, likewise, thank you for joining me again.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure.
And Patrick, also thank you for you as a male role model.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for joining us. I hope to see you in the lounge right after this, or maybe another time, another webinar. And also for the people who are listening to the recording, thank you for listening in. And you can download the slides. And I hope you get a lot out of it. And make sure we continue to do the good thing, not only on International Women's Day, but also in the rest of the year. So thank you again, and see you later. And maybe I see you in the lounge. And bye-bye.